we're live. If you suddenly heard for the first time you got our emails on, which is we are here. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our latest LinkedIn Live. I'm Ruth Forster from Wagstaff Recruitment and Careers Coaching. It's a pleasure for me to have Charlotte and Philippa here with me today. I've just put a note in there. Please use the chat to just say hello, but also we'd love to have your comments on what we share and use it for any questions. So we're going to dive straight into this. Charlotte, over to you. Quick introduction to say hello.
Hello everybody, I'm Charlotte Sykes of CWR Consultancy in Northamptonshire. Hopefully some of you will have seen my face before doing events both with Ruth and Philippa, but if not, lovely to see you.
Hello everyone, I'm Philippa Hart, Heart Training and Recruitment, and thank you Ruth for inviting me today. The reason that the three of us together, we've known and worked with each other a very long time, working as associates in recruitment originally, and now we deliver training and consultancy work. And what's been really interesting this last year is how many companies have been talking to us and approaching us about the recruitment process, and obviously how it can be very costly when it goes wrong, but not just cost in terms of money. And obviously, yes, if you've paid a recruitment fee and the person hasn't worked out, as recruiters, we can't control everything. So we do know that in certain situations, people may leave, unfortunately, due to personal situations. But sometimes when we're rushing the process and we pay a fee, perhaps a bit quickly because we haven't followed our recruitment process and the person drops out, the true cost it's not only the fee, it's also the time that that process has taken. And I mean, when you're Googling stats and looking at business cases of how much does it cost for the wrong recruitment hire, they're estimating it's 12 to 15K. And that's a sort of 30 to 40, 50K job role. So you can imagine the cost of a bad hire to your business. But what's interesting when we've been talking about it, and when we go in and review a company to look at their process, we notice how much time has been taken, and it's inefficient use of time. And that is a real cost to your business. And for example, I've got a client that we were working with recently, and just from the world of emails and how many people are copied into an email, and we got a situation where we got 5 individuals being copied into an email from the head office recruitment email to the HR person that was looking after it, through to the head of department, the department manager, and the team leader. Now, if you imagine 5 individuals reading a CV, you need to give a CV 10 minutes to really review that. And look, that's 50 minutes of time. If you've then got 6 CVs, you've nearly got 6 hours worth of time, management time that's being taken. So what we're going to be talking today is just about tips on how to make that process a bit more efficient and save you money and investment of time.
When you think about it like that, isn't it? You don't. Do we get into automatic pilot? We get into that whole thing of, or do we you overthink who needs to be involved and who needs to be looking at things. It's only when you say it like that. Goodness, yeah, 5 people and their time. That's a lot.
I love the fact that you think of the time against that, but also think of the money. You've got 5 managers or managers' salaries, and that meant 6 hours. You think, okay, what would be a manager's hourly rate? 300 quid, 400 quid, 500 quid an hour? Once you look at the actual salaries, and you go 500 quid an hour, times 6 hours, times 5 people already, and the process hasn't even really started. And that's what's interesting, is finding these little nuances. And I think that's a really, really valid point, because I think, Philippa, there's a presumption there, isn't there, that by copying that many people in, you're being really efficient because you're keeping everybody in the loop, because then everybody knows where you stand with the recruitment process. But
Yeah.
actually, we're going to challenge that. Hang on a second. Is that the most efficient use of time? And is that the most efficient use of money? I'm really sorry if there's a bit of playback. I'm not quite sure why that's happening on mine, so I don't know if you can hear that. But yeah, so it's a really, really interesting take, and I've noticed a trend of it happening more often, and maybe that's potentially due to people working in different locations or people working from home a bit, and then again thinking that we have to communicate with each other this way and we have to all be copied in so that we all know what's happening. But actually, why are we not looking at just identifying a few key people within the process? So yeah, I think you said that was a recent client, Philippa, did you?
Yeah. So that's happened recently, just generally through the recruitment process.
Really good. And if we look at kind of where that can be, it is interesting because actually it has an impact on the rest of the process, doesn't it? It has an impact on our day-to-day work. It has an impact on, if we're pulled away from our actual work to suddenly having to focus on, on the recruitment bit. So how does that then stagnate, particularly within an engineering business? And Ruth, you must see this a lot when you've got engineering clients that have got a production facility.
Mhm.
How have you seen that impact? How have you seen kind of where those areas and where those efficiencies have been affected, both time and financially? Have you got a situation you might tell us about that you've seen?
I think it's interesting in the engineering manufacturing world as well, and because people will come in and they're not sat at the desk. So if you're thinking about reviewing CVs and waiting, the time then waited to give feedback on the CV, people will come in, get on initially, look at emails first thing in the morning, but then they'll be in the plants. And there could be things that are happening constantly where, and if you think about the percentage of time that they will be allocating of their job to recruitment and the hiring process, not their main job. As a recruiter, that's our main job, that's our focus all the time. And when you're putting an application in, your focus is you're waiting to get back on that application. But the reality is, if you've got a manufacturing director or an engineering director, they're running the plant. So if you've got more than one person in that process reviewing CVs, or you're waiting for somebody, that's a time lapse, and that's the process slowing down and having an impact. And if it's slowing down and having an impact, how long is it then to get that person in to hire? How does that then impact on when you put an application in, you're waiting for feedback? Having a conversation with somebody this week, and we were talking about when you're in the thick of the job and you're hiring, it isn't your primary task to do those interviews. Apologies, feedback somewhere is just knocking me a little bit. It's not your priority. If you're the one that's putting the application in, it's fine that you're waiting for to hear back from somebody. That feels like forever, and that's an impact then on brands. And I think getting that information and that process right in the beginning, speed up the process and can add valuable time and cut the costs in the process. And it all comes down to communication, doesn't it? You communicate with people internally and externally, and then manage expectations. Because if you don't get it right at that point, could you lose a candidate because their expectation is it's going to be better?
So,
I
think that's a really, really valid point on that in terms of the expectation and the time manage the expectation. Because if you're an individual and you're applying for a job, you do have an expectation you'll hear back. And if you don't, you go on to something else. But as a business, you just presume that that's okay to keep that person waiting because you're concentrating on something else. So as you said, from a brand, it really impacts. But also, if you're in production or if you're in engineering and you're pulling yourself out of your day-to-day to do your recruitment, there's a question there actually. Are you explaining that to if that's delaying your customers because you're having to prioritise your recruitment, are you being clear? So there's a lovely client that we work with here in Northamptonshire who actually had to be really, really brave during a recruitment process where they were CNC work, loads of really high tech, loads of prototype work for the F1 sector, aerospace defence, really, really niche business. But they had a few staff changes and they suddenly found themselves their most technical engineers were doing their most basic work just because the basic work had to be done for them to move through the stations to the technical work. So we just have to have a roundtable discussion to say, actually, how can we do this? Because at the moment, the business is losing work, which is costing a lot. It's costing reputational damage. And recruitment-wise, what do we do? Do we put temps in? Do we hire permanent? What do we do? And actually, we devised a strategy where we put out a communication to the end user customers to say, could you please bear with us? We just need to spend a bit of time internally to bring our trainees up to the level that you require. And we are doing this for you. We're not doing it because, but we're doing this so that you get the quality of work that you have asked us to deliver. And it was a really, really interesting take on how you manage that recruitment hiccup, but actually for positive, because the impact that had on the relationship with the end user customer is actually the customer went, we've never had a business ring us and tell us what's going on with, their aches and pains for recruitment. Of course, and I think 90% of the customers had absolutely no problem to extend your delivery times out by, I think for some of them, it ended up being 3 months extended delivery time. But it meant that the customer and the business really, really, really had a valued team because they realised that actually the quicker they could get up to speed, the quicker they could work, the better it was going to be for all of them as a team. So you suddenly had really happy business that was working really tightly together and all pulling together from a recruitment point of view, really happy customers because customers felt completely in the loop. And when we're looking at how you can save money and how you can save efficiencies, for me, they could have gone I think it's a really good case of showing where you can save it, because they could have done it and they could have put loads of temps in, and then suddenly you're managing loads of temps and you're managing, contract, anything. But actually they said, no, we're going to just be really honest about this. So probably to the extent of too much communication, maybe.
No, I don't think so. I think the too much communication goes back to Philippa's point about everybody being copied into the emails. I think that's really effective communication. And I've got a good example of that as well, but just on the communication side of things, I don't think our chat's working. So I've got my phone with me as well. So anybody, people do have my number and my LinkedIn there. Pop it in a message because there's nothing coming through at the moment. And I know people are there. So just on that, because people are there, but there's no comments. On the communication piece, we had a really, really interesting situation earlier this year. We were working with a client who had been really clear on what they wanted. We got into the process with them and we just weren't hitting it right with them. I'll be honest with you, we were thinking, we're totally missing the ball here. And I was just about to call and schedule meeting and look, I think we're missing something here. And they emailed me and said, can you just schedule a call with you? Well, it's going to be the same thing. We're not hitting it right here. And the HR manager came on and the finance director came on, and they said, we're really sorry, we've been slow on CVs, which they had a bit. And what we've realised is going through this process is we're not clear on what we want. Things are just unraveling. And I think we need to press pause. Well, actually, we need to press pause. And they scheduled a call with me to apologise press pause. And communication for me was a breath of fresh air, because it didn't need to take that time, but what it actually did was it protected the brand, because the next time we came to a curriculum and we had, I've got an example of how they demonstrate their behaviours as an organisation to use from when we're attracting the next talent for their business. So wrapping in communication process, what we did is we learned that they needed to have more clarity in what they were looking for. But they were brave enough. Yeah, we're saying there's really bad feedback. I don't know whether one of us needs to go on mute while we're not talking. Try that if that works. That's better. Still hear me?
I can hear you.
I will carry on. Thank you very much, Mike, for saying that. That was really, really helpful. And if you could just say whether that's made a difference, that will be really helpful. Thank you very much. So they saved time on. It was helpful within the process. Speakers, I think, Ruth, Adam's now. The chat's coming in now, so that's good. So Adam, if you can tell me that's if we're all good, then that's good as well. There's a delay on LinkedIn as well. You know, this is about just reacting to things going wrong, the same as the process within your recruitment strategy. So yeah, so they realised that they weren't clear on what they wanted out of this hire. They pressed pause, they communicated back, they gave me a clear example of their behaviours as a business, which we could then utilise, and we have now recruited for them. So for me, that was a really good sign of how to use your time, even if it was to stop a process. I'm not sure who wants to jump in now and see whether it's, because everybody says it's a lot better, so it's one of you two. You're still.
Oh, we've both now. Shall I go? Yeah. So I think what you've just been talking about there is absolutely so essential to obviously the recruitment process. And I don't think companies always realise the damage that can be done to their brand when the communication slows down so much. And I think it's the reality of making sure when you are recruiting, you almost need to timescale it from the beginning to the end. Because, oh gosh, when I started in recruitment 22 years ago, we would be so proud that we would get CVs over in 24 hours. Do you remember those days, girls? 24 hours, you'd have a CV on your desk because we'd already pre-screened, we'd already done all the stuff for you. But the process is so much longer now, and attracting candidates in a skill and short market means the process is more thorough. So when we're taking vacancies now, we're talking to clients about, we will turn around candidates for you that have had a full first interview, but in a week's time we'll present them to you. It's not about 2 days' time. Now, there are one-offs with that, and I have to admit, Leah's had a fabulous call this morning from a brand new client, and she actually did the old traditional spec somebody in over the phone. They've got an interview tomorrow, so it can happen. However, I was then.
But on that, Leah has already done the interview. So
Yes.
Even though it's quick, Leah's done the pre-screen. Pre-screen, it's not a pre-screen, it's an interview. So she built the relationship with that individual, and it's about whether you're using a recruitment agency or you're doing it yourself. It's building that relationship, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's all about those relationships. And it's also with timings of years, availability for interviews, because if you get a pile of CVs and you're using perhaps numerous recruitment agencies, the challenge in the background is the candidates will probably speak to all the recruitment agencies because they're on the market and they may have 5 phone calls about your particular job role. And sometimes that doesn't go down well with the candidate. But also then it's about the time of feedback, because whereas recruiters and companies out there get ghosted by candidates and they just seem to disappear, then companies are also ghosting the candidates. So they're not giving feedback for CVs. I would expect feedback within 24 hours if you've received a CV, not 2 or 3 weeks, because your company brand then, it's just gone because the candidate needs a job role. And if you're last to feedback, the candidate is not starting off on a good footing with you. And the recruitment agency as well doesn't know what to say to the candidate, because they need to be truthful and say, we've not heard back. And I had a really interesting situation as well, where we see a new client. We visited them face to face, taken the brief because we like to see the premises. We like, even if they're working hybrid, where the head office is, etc. Took the spec, said we will come back within a week, explained all the process. And then in that week, obviously, we had candidates that they had made. There was one candidate they'd spoken to directly who was on interview. Now, we had some reservations about this candidate. She fit about 70% of the job. We rang the client because we'd got 3 other candidates, and to pre-warn them, they need to test A, B, and C in their interview the following day. But the client ghosted us. Now, they ghosted us for a week, another week, and within that other week, the candidate was obviously offered the position. They waited for them to accept, and then they spoke to us. But what was a shame, and what I was trying to get across, is we work in partnership with you. We were going to work with you, give you the heads up on that particular candidate, because we'd already spent an hour interviewing them, have some comparisons. Said individual started, 3 weeks later left the business, and they've had to start the process again. The cost of that with time, etc., was huge, but it didn't matter if they found person, because to be honest, most recruiters totally respect you should be able to find the right candidate for yourself. Come to us when you need your comparisons or it's too specific for you to be able to be looking at. But we are partnerships, and we should be able to trust each other.
And I think there's a comment from somebody on LinkedIn saying one of the problems that they're having is that they're getting gazumped. The biggest headache is this, salary increases and getting gazumped by the current employer really annoys this business, as they feel that the candidate was not really interested in the position at that time. Now, I know I can certainly speak from our experience, is there is a fine balance and it's about those first initial interviews of finding out somebody's motivations to move. I don't know what the stat is now. I don't know what the percentage is of when somebody gets a counter offer, how quickly they still then leave. It used to be within 6 to 9 months, 80% of people would still move even after they've had the counter offer. But again, it's that partnership, be it with the recruiter being able to be honest to say, we think there's a counter offer coming, because we know that one of the reasons they want to move is salary, and that's quite high up. So we're not saying that this won't be a successful process, but be mindful that this is where they are. And I think that comes back to your point, Philippa, about communication and true recruitment partnerships.
Yeah, and what I was going to say in addition to that is, I will always say to companies, try and be open-minded, that if a candidate does perhaps turn you down, it's not off with their head and you'll never speak to them again, because they may have made a mistake. And I would always recommend they get back in touch with this candidate within 3 months of them perhaps turning the position down, to check how they're getting on. Because if you just said, Ruth, that wasn't the crux for leaving, so people stay, or sometimes people make the wrong decision with a job choice, but they're too embarrassed perhaps to come back to you, but they've learned from that. And I don't know about Charlotte and Ruth, with what we're experiencing at the moment is these crazy salaries that have been offered over the last year or 18 months. We're now getting phone calls with redundancies, and people, because those companies couldn't sustain those bigger salaries they were offering.
I would certainly say that we've experienced that, and certainly within the people that I've spoken to have said that as soon as redundancies come through, that's going to be the higher salary. We're going to try and let you back in. So if you're going to cause any noise, Charlotte. No, we can't hear you. But then, would you like to come back in and try? No, you're not muted. We can't hear you now. No. Okay. Well, just pop some comments in the chat if you'd like, Charlotte. Okay, so Adam has confirmed and said 6 months. According to the data he's just found, I know Adam and I have talked about this a lot within engineering and manufacturing, about people that will take a counter offer and then will stay. Won't stay. They'll still then to leave. Question here then from John. Again, John, I know John well. He's in manufacturing and operational excellence. Do you think the employer really values the partnership with a recruiter, as they're probably not aware of the market dynamics, and equally their business as the only one to join? Philippa, I'll put. Oh, Charlotte, you back now?
Can you hear me now?
Yay!
I don't know what's going on today. I think that's a really valid point, John, and I think these trusted partnerships that businesses have with recruiters are not built overnight. And to answer, do businesses really value that? Is the responsibility of the recruiter to ask that and build that with them, I feel, to get to a point where a business would ring exactly as Philippa said and said, could I just sound you out about this? Or we've had somebody come to us, what do you think? And use us for our professional expertise. That is our job. Our job is to know the market. Our job is to know what the candidates are doing. Our job is to know what salaries are doing. Our job is to be that one to ask what are the motivations for leaving and to do all of that. And I personally, if I don't share that information with a client, of course they're not going to respect me and see my value. So if I'm not sharing market knowledge, if I'm not sharing, the what's happening on the coalface, then of course I'm not going to be valued, and I'm not going to be held in high esteem because I'm an agency. Whereas actually, if I'm seen as a professional who does the job of being on the front line, then I will be respected. So I hope that's helpful. So I think it depends on the relationships you've built up. If you have built and are known to have that professional experience, advice, support, knowledge, then absolutely they'll hold you in high esteem. But I think it's a really valid point. And of course, every business thinks they're the best business to work for to a certain extent. And I'd actually probably challenge that one a little bit, because sometimes when businesses go to market, there is an element of self-doubt. How can we market this role when we're not paying as much as other people? How can we market it when we can't offer what all these big guys are? And that's the world I operate in, that SME market, private family businesses that can't pay these big corporate salaries. So, and they would probably say they're not always the best business to join, but there will be somebody where it is the right place, right company for them. So we have to work harder on that. But yeah, really interesting points, definitely.
I think there's a really valid point around relationships, and I'll give my insights on that. But while John and Adam are in the chat, and Christoph's in the chat as well. So, engineering minds, I want to just ask a question, taking us back to the beginning of this. When we were talking about process and losing time and time equaling money and the whole thing of CVs not being looked at and not getting clarity in the beginning on that recruitment process. I don't have an engineering brain, but I love the engineering brains I work with. Can you give your insights on how would you see this within process and continuous improvement of how you would measure the impact of a poor process within recruitment? Is there something that we could consider from an engineering brain? I'm going to leave that with you, see what you come up with. I'm going to go back to what you've just talked about, relationships, Charlotte, and just share something that threw me, and I had to question something. So back in the pandemic, we started dealing with a global organisation, not dealt with them before, but my contact had moved from a HR director role from one global organisation into another. And they'd asked me to start recruiting a marketing professional within their engineering business. We scheduled the interviews. We did a proper brief. You know, we had Teams calls. There were remote workers. So we did everything. We were briefed on the role. They gave us all of the information. They did the first interview 20 minutes. Okay. Well, the second candidate back for the second interview, 40 minutes, went to offer. All on Teams. I was just thinking, this is an executive role. This feels too short. So I called, going back to the relationships, I called the HR director. I said, they've been really quick and that's lovely. It really is lovely, but it feels a bit quick. And I'm a bit, and I've not dealt with the business before. We've got a relationship. I've not dealt with the business before. And his words to me were, Ruth, you're really right to highlight this. And I thought that at first when I joined this business. But trust me, they understand what they want. They've got a process. And I trust them. Okay, big breath. You know, it's that balance, isn't it? You want quick, but you want it in detail. Person's still there 3.5 years later and has been promoted. What it said to me was two things. Number one, it goes back to John's comment about relationships. I had a strong enough relationship with somebody that I'd known for a long time that had been built up over a period of time to be able to say, can I just flag this with you without stopping the process, but can I just flag it? Number two is they knew their process was right and they got the process. So I'm going to go back to process and I'm going to read these. You guys, if you've got any comments on that, well, I just keep reading what Adam's put about standardized process. So I'm just going to digest this and see what we've got.
I was wondering whether you're going to read that loud, Ruth.
I can't read and write. I read and talk as quick. So here we go. Adam, I standardise the process within Goodrich Recruitment internally. Specific KPIs at key stages. CVs sat on managers' desks, not getting processed. Now lost the candidate. We also had the process of communication with recruitment professionals. Christoph, engineering is very broad, so understanding the actual customer market is very important to understand the right candidate for the job posted. Understanding this, in my opinion, will help write the correct job advert and offer the correct potential to the correct potential future employee. Do you know what? I think that's a really valid point, Christoph, because understanding that clarity right at the beginning. So it's that piece of somebody's resigned, are we just replacing straight away? Pausing and saying, what do we need? It might mean there's 3 people sat there to clearly understand what's needed, but the time saved taking that time for clarity at that point saves it further down the line when somebody applies for a job advert that doesn't match what they get interviewed for, because I'm sure people have had that before when they've attended interviews and it's not been the right thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because recently we picked up a role that had evolved. Nobody been in the position for 12 months, and the job spec was written, and I looked at it and went, oh, I can tell which director's written this. So made a suggestion of perhaps me going in and facilitating a discussion. And we do that quite a lot now, where we will facilitate a discussion between managers or executives or directors, and then we write the job spec so that we can give them the job description as their first draft, and then they can tweak it. And what has worked so well with that process is the feedback from the candidates, because then when we forward that job description to a candidate before their first interview with us, the feedback has been great, because they said, well, that's comprehensive and it's so clear on what's expected. I'll talk through my history specific to that, but I can see this gap. And that's where we've had honesty from candidates, because they had that document before they came into their first interview with us, never mind before we present them to the client.
I always like to call it front loading time to save time at the back end, and front loading money at the front end to save it at the back end. You know, and we're talking about how can we save time? Well, we can save time by doing our job properly, all of us, and taking responsibility for that before we even start the process. Because you know, that cost and that figure, Philippa, of the £12,000 to £15,000, you know, fine, a corporate can swallow it. What about, you know, a smaller business definitely can't swallow it. And that's happening maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a year for a business. That's a lot of money in it. And I think I love that story, Ruth. And it does, it makes you feel a bit squeaky, doesn't it, when they say first interview is 20 minutes, second was 40. And I think all of us, all three of us, would challenge that. And we just want to check and balance it, not to challenge it, to check and balance it and say, can I just double check, you know, this is really good. But what a situation to get in where you're comfortable, exactly like you've just said, Philippa, you're comfortable with the brief and it's current. You're comfortable with the person spec and it's current. You're comfortable that when you're prepping your candidates for interview, they know exactly what they're going for. And likewise, the brief of an individual going to a business is accurate, current, and up to date. So it's this detail, I suppose. It's the detail, and we're talking about this process. If you put the detail in the process, it's going to be efficient.
Yeah, and you know, both John and Adam have said about the process, getting that process, monitoring it, and testing it through. It's about process and standard work instructions internally and externally. And references, John said about references, and ideally not from the nominated referee, as they tend to be biased, but maybe try and source someone from the candidate's current or previous business that may be more honest. That can be a real time saver. That's using your network, John, and so we've got relationships that help within the recruitment process. Getting the process right will save us time. Having a network where we can pull on people to get some non-market knowledge and understanding. Yeah, really good content. We're 1:10. It's like, well, this is a big subject. It's a really, really big subject. And I really thank everybody that once the chat got working, so I think it was a bit sluggish. So John, thank you very much for messaging me and telling me that wasn't working, but I don't know what happened. It just started to work. We've definitely had the technology gremlins come in, but that's what happens with the process, isn't it? Every best laid plan, you then have to just evolve and communicate and think on your feet.
Exactly. And I think, you know, for all of us, hopefully this has given really good insight, you know, into scenarios, things that we're seeing, things, situations that we've experienced. And I suppose for those of you who are here, if you feel that you've seen that, or you're going through that, or you notice pinch points, please reach out to us. You know, we'd love to be connected on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. We are going to be running an event in January, aren't we, Philippa? Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yes. So on the 24th of January, we will be running a free in-person event, which will be in Birmingham City Centre. And it's a New Year recess meeting. So we ran it last January, where we had a great theme of leadership, employee value proposition, because obviously that's what the three of us specialise in. But this January, we're going to be looking at equality, diversity and inclusion as part of your recruitment process, as part of your retention strategy, as part of successional planning and innovation, but also about what your business is doing out in the community to attract people. Are you working with universities? Are you working with colleges? What are you doing? So we'll be touching on both topics. So anybody that's come today, we will send you an automatic invite for that in the next few weeks. But yeah, 24th of January, we'll let you know what's happening.
Absolutely. Brilliant. I suppose it just leaves us, I'm sorry that I'm going sunny and not sunny. The sun is here in Northamptonshire, so you can see the sun is back out. Just leaves us to say thank you so much for coming. Thank you for engagement on the chat. Thank you for your questions. And again, reach out to us, keep in touch with us, and we look forward to hopefully seeing lots of you in person on the 24th. And it leaves me to say thank you very much to Ruth and Philippa for, as always, a wonderful and engaging discussion where lots of knowledge is shared, lots of expertise again, is shared as well. But we'd love to hear from you and look forward to seeing you all really soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye.